Hello everyone and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today we're going to talk about where and how to stress words. One question I'm often asked is, if I make a sentence, how do I know where to put the stress? Well, there's a couple of answers to this. One thing is that the stress on words with more consonants tend to fall in different places across the English world. So you have to be quite careful where you put the stress on a new word that you learn. That's why it's really important to learn the sound of a word as well as seeing it on the page when you learn it. Let me give you a few examples. So let's look at the word advertisement. Advertisement. Now you can hear there that the stress is going into the V. Advertisement. It's going into the advertisement, the second syllable, the second part of that word. Advertisement. But if you were in America, in the USA, that word becomes advertisement. Advertisement. So you see, it kind of changes between British English and American English. This takes me all the way back to what I always tell you, and that is, you have to really choose a location. Where do you belong in the English world, and then drill down into that to see how they say things. People who listen to newscasts for learning on YouTube, for example, first in America, second one British, third one Australian, fourth one Indian, you're going to get very confused. And if you're shadowing with those things, it's going to become a bit difficult because you'll end up with an accent which is all mixed up. So it's much better to have a place in mind, make sure your media comes from that place, and then you know you're going to be consistent in your learning. Now that's point number one, okay, about how words change depending on where you are in the English-speaking world. The example I just gave there was advertisement, which in American English becomes advertisement. Another example would be macrame. You know, that Japanese art of tying string together, tying rope together to make plant holders. Macrame in English, but in American English it's macrame. You see, it's these kind of things that really would throw you off, you know. Anyway, my second point, which I wanted to mention to you, is all about the stress in a sentence. So if I say, for example, let's see now, if I just think of an example, your questions answered. Your questions answered. Depending on where I put the stress, I could change the meaning of that phrase. Your questions answered. Not mine, but yours. Your questions answered. Not just your statements, not just other things in your mind, but your questions answered. Or if I put the stress in the third place, your questions answered, not ignored, but answered. So you see how stress can become really important and how it can change what you mean. So you need to be really careful with that. And again, everything in context. So as long as you are able to identify where you want to put the stress in a sentence, what you're trying to highlight, it's okay. But if you're blindly reading an email from the boss, you need to be careful with that. Because, for example, I have decided not to give you a pay rise this year. Or, I have decided not to give you a pay rise. I have decided not to give you a pay rise this year, which might imply that something else good is coming, if not a pay rise. It could be because you're getting a massive bonus instead, something like that. So you see, stress is really important and you need to be very aware of that. So my point number 1 was about stress in the words, which can be a little bit complicated depending on where you are. Even I sometimes hear American TV shows and I think, what did they just say? And it's because they have a stress in a different part of the word. The example I gave, of course, was advertisement, which becomes advertisement. Macrame, which becomes macrame. And of course, secondly, my point was that you need to be very careful where you put the stress in a sentence. I will teach you English. I will teach you English rather than Spanish. Yeah, so just be very aware. And of course, as always, the best way to catch this is through shadowing. The more you can shadow with a native speaker, copy them, just begin to notice where they stress things. That's it from me. Have a great day. Bye.